Oh, well, I was working in a second-hand bookshop. It was my second-hand bookshop, actually. I left university and the economy wasn't so great at that point. I'd worked in offices before. I had nothing to lose and I started to buy and sell second-hand books. And this grew into quite a little business, and I ran it with a partner in the bookshop. And I did that for about 8 years, and it was a fabulous job. It was a brilliant job. Anybody could walk through the door, and they did. I met lots of just fascinating people. I learned a lot about books. I think I got a great education reading the books that came in, and seeing the connections between people's collections. And booksellers and book collectors in particular are very generous. They might have taken them years to amass the knowledge that they have, and they were very open and very willing to talk about that and share their knowledge. So it was a lovely job. Partly working in the second-hand world, going to auctions. It's like any other business, I guess, actually. Whatever your business, you meet people that are in the same line as you or in a similar line. So I knew lots of antique dealers, I knew lots of book dealers, lots of collectors, I knew auctioneers. And it's a fascinating world, a really interesting world, a world all of its own. And I think that just began to draw me in. It does, doesn't it? But I would say that I still consider myself a reader, of course. I think all writers, first and foremost, are readers. And I think for most of us, if it was, do you want, you can never read a book again, but you can still write, or you can still write and you can never read a book again. I would always go down on the reading side. But I guess I did consider myself a reader. It took me a long time, I think, to consider myself a writer. I'm not sure why that would be. Even when I'd finished my first book, even when it was published, I thought of myself as someone who had written a book. I didn't think of myself as a writer. So I don't know quite when that happened, but I do now. Simply, I could just say it changed my life. Actually, it changed my life in lots of different ways. It opened a lot of doors for me. I was somebody who, although I had connections in the second-hand book selling world, I didn't have connections in the publishing world. I didn't really know anything about that. I knew some writers who came into the bookshop, but I didn't know that world at all. And so it took me somewhere else. The great thing is, it didn't take me away entirely from the world that I'd been in. I still have the same friends. I have a lot of friends that are writers. I have a lot of friends who are not writers. And I think this is an important thing for writers to still keep your feet on the ground. Don't, yeah, just not to get overexcited. I think you have ideas which are not novels. Sometimes you don't know that until you start playing around with them. So some concepts, some ideas, some concerns belong in a play, or they belong with music. I think again though, it's that opportunity to step out of the realm that you know, and what could be more interesting than going and working in somebody else's world. So to work with a composer is fascinating, really fascinating. It then perhaps informs the way in which I work on a novel. I think my planning for my novels has got better, actually, got sharper since I've been working with Stuart McRae, who's a composer that I've collaborated with. The great thing, once you've finished the libretto, once the composer's done his work, you then get to go in and see the orchestra and all of this this kind of stuff. And it's the same with plays. You get to go into theatres, you get to meet actors, directors, and all of the time, hopefully, your knowledge, your fund of skills is expanding. So you want these pieces to be good in their own right, and then you hope also that that will feed into the other work that you do, into novels and whatever. It's a funny thing, isn't it? I can see why people put labels on things. We need to call things something in order to be able to discuss them for a start. Also, of course, publishers, booksellers need to be able to classify things in order to sell them. I guess I actually don't mind. I don't mind to an extent what people call me, as long as it's fairly polite. I guess I want to be on all of the shelves. I don't necessarily want to be confined to being a Scottish writer, a gay writer, a crime writer. The thing that I do like about being called a crime writer, and I've heard writers who have kind of balked at it, I think there's a little bit of snobbery actually in not wanting to be called a crime writer. I think these genre books, I hope, are books that everybody feel able to read, everybody feels drawn towards them. They're books that have a strong narrative, and that's something that I'm interested in. I think first and foremost, I am a storyteller. I do enjoy stories. That's perhaps why I got into books, when as a child, as most of us do. I think the need for narrative is a very, very strong one within human beings across all cultures. And so I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not made uncomfortable by it. The only point, I guess, at which you would get uncomfortable is if you then get confined and people say, well, you can't do this because you are this kind of writer, whatever that is. Publishing, like everything else, is under commercial constraints, and I think that's the danger zone, and that's the thing that hopefully. So it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because Val McDermid is such. I think she's read every crime book going, and she's such a great supporter to lots of other writers. I wonder if we have a lot in common actually with the Scandinavian crime writers as well. And I don't know if that's partly to do with climate or actually physically for a long time. Parts of Scotland have had a lot of contact with that part of the world, with Nordic countries, I guess. I guess there's something I think that's not confined to Scottish crime writing. I think Scottish literature in general is socially aware, socially concerned. I think we're non-elitist. I think actually when you look at our fiction, our literature across genres, there's a concern with ordinary people, ordinary lives. How do we live within this world with all of its problems? So perhaps that's one of the aspects, an element of social concern. Also an element of I don't know. I think crime writing is so diverse as well, though, because I think we're also drawn very much towards a lot of what we think of as American noir as well. This idea of walking through the dark streets, and so our influences are very diverse. But maybe for me, that's the core thing: a social sense and a sense of non-elitism, which also I'm very happy to say is reflected in the way in which Scottish writers are treated. I think we're treated with respect, but we're not seen of as being up there, which is very good. I am. I'm writer in residence in both these places until April next year. So I go to the School of Art one day a week, and I go to the Glasgow University one day a week, and it's a real pleasure. I remember when I found out as a student that this post existed, I thought, wow, can you imagine having that job? And it means I work with people across all of the disciplines within those two institutions, and listen to their creative writing and give them feedback on their creative writing, organise readings and events, and I'm very much hoping to get enough money to make an anthology of work from writers from both of these places. There's such a diversity of it. It's really, I think our poets are amazing. I think we have world class poets at the moment. I would really recommend, if people haven't come across her already, Jen Hadfield, who's a young poet, originally from England actually, but who's living in Shetland now and has lived there for quite a while. Her poetry is astounding. There's a whole bunch of poets slightly older than her, John Burnside, Don Patterson, Robin Robertson, very, very astounding poets, often with a real appreciation of nature as well, but a lot going on there. Something that's interesting that has kind of happened in the last 2 years, is an interesting influx of memoirs from writers within Scotland. So John Burnside, Jackie Kay, Janice Galloway have all written very, very different memoirs, and I say memoirs advisedly because there are points when you think, oh, is this real? Is this not real? And all about very different aspects of Scotland in a sense as well. I guess they come from Scotland, so the memoirs are going to reflect that. So in John Burnside's case, in his first memoir, I think a very interesting insight into masculinity within Scotland. Yeah, well, I should say not all of the novels are in all of the languages, if that makes sense. Yeah. But it's interesting because the best thing is that you get to go to other countries. You get invited to places that you might never ever have been to. Places like Serbia, and who are they're very interested in our football teams. Often I go places and people are really interested in the sport of Scotland. I know nothing about it. In Germany, I always get asked about Rilke. Why did you choose the name of this great German poet for the name of your first detective? Yeah, and I think that has been the nicest thing, being able to travel and meet different people. I would say that the readers in other countries, I think, are as diverse as the readers within our own countries, and so often the questions are similar, and sometimes different. And I got asked in Germany again about the feminist contents within the work, and I'm doing my first reading in Iowa this afternoon, so nice. We'll see what the feedback there is. No, I've been fortunate. I've done American tours before, and so I've been to Chicago and Seattle and San Francisco and New York, and in Canada as well, several times. But this is the longest that I've stayed. For me, it's been great. One of the other residents put it really well, Moshe. He said there's enough happening so that we feel engaged, we feel part of the city, and yet you're left on your own enough to be able to write. And I've written a lot while I've been here. I'm trying to finish my next book, and I'm really hoping that I might go away with some kind of finished manuscript. So for me, it's been really, really interesting. I find this part of the world very friendly, very accepting. I guess it's a university town as well, and so you get all of the benefits that go with a university. And I've also, it's fall now, and we've been able to go out and enjoy nature as well, and to see eagles, which I never ever thought that I would get to do. That's one of the really, really, really big thrills. I think that the insight into another culture that you only get sometimes when you stay a little bit longer and do the everyday things. Go to the store, walk around, go to the post office, all of that stuff, because it's nice. I mean, it's great to meet other writers. I can't say how good it is, but it's also very nice to mix with people that are not writers as well. Um, well, the last thing that we worked on together, we wrote a play together, and that was the first time that we talked together in the past. We've done tours and talks together, but we'd never actually written anything together. And we did think, is this a good way to break up a relationship? We laughed and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed as we began to write it, and we just had so much fun. And then I think there's always a tipping point, because you go from the planning to the actual doing it, the actual rendering it. And we had decided to write it in relays. One person would write one bit, pass it to the next person. And actually that proved impossible. It just didn't work. And so we did it line by line. And we were very lucky. There's a place in Glasgow, the Playwrights Studio, who will lend free of charge a room if they have it available to playwrights. And so we hired this room for free. And we spent our time there, and we did it not in our home. And that worked really well. And we did fall out. Nobody cried, nobody shouted, but there were points when we got icily polite towards each other, and then it worked okay. I would do it again, which I think is the best thing that you can say. I guess I've been writing for about 10 years now, and I think I never. I started off with no expectations whatsoever. I did join the Creative Writing Masters at the University of Glasgow. I was amazed to get in, and I didn't think that I would get published. I suppose in my heart I must have wanted to get published, but I didn't really think that I would. And then when I did get published, I knew what happened to first novels. There's a lot of first novels out there. So when I wanted to work hard to support it, I didn't really expect that anything that would happen. And I guess often you're asked to give advice to new writers, or to writers in their early years of their craft. And I think my advice is always, well, read. But write what you want to write. Don't write for the market. Just write that thing that's here, because actually, who knows, it might do well, it might not. At least you have that satisfaction that you worked hard on something that you cared about, their knowledge. So it was a lovely job. Partly working the second-hand world, going to auctions. It's like any other business, I guess, actually. Whatever your business, you meet people that are in the same line as you, or in a similar line. So I knew lots of antique dealers, I knew lots of book dealers, lots of collectors, I knew auctioneers. And it's a fascinating world, a really interesting world, a world all of its own. And I think that just began to draw me in. But I do now. Simply, I could just say it changed my life. Actually, it changed my life in lots of different ways. It opened a lot of doors for me. I was somebody who, although I had connections in the second-hand book selling world, I didn't have connections in the publishing world. I didn't really know anything about that. I knew some writers who came into the bookshop, but I didn't know that world at all. And so it took me, it took me somewhere else. The great thing is, it didn't take Oh, well, I was working in a second-hand bookshop. It was my second-hand bookshop, actually. I left university and the economy wasn't so great at that point. I'd worked in offices before. I had nothing to lose and I started to buy and sell second-hand books, and this grew into quite a little business, and I ran it with a partner in the bookshop, and I did that for about 8 years, and it was a fabulous job. It was a brilliant job. Anybody could walk through the door, and they did. I met lots of just fascinating people. I learned a lot about books. I think I got a great education reading the books that came in, and seeing the connections between people's collections. And booksellers and book collectors in particular are very generous. They might have taken them years to amass the knowledge that they have, and they were very open and very willing to talk about that and share it. It does, isn't it? But I would say that I still consider myself a reader, of course. I think all writers, first and foremost, are readers. And I think for most of us, if it was, you can never read a book again, but you can still write, or you can still write and you can never read a book again, I would always go down on the reading side. But I guess I did consider myself a reader. It took me a long time, I think, to consider myself a writer. I'm not sure why that would be. Even when I'd finished my first book, even when it was published, I thought of myself as someone who had written a book. I didn't think of myself as a writer. So I don't know quite when that happened.